Step into the enchanting realm of Sleeping Beauty, a timeless tale that has captivated generations of children. But this romantic saga of good triumphing over evil conceals a far more complex and disturbing past. Beyond its charming surface lies a narrative fraught with unsettling themes of death, desire, and violence. Yet, what sets this story apart is the tantalizing possibility that its origins may be rooted in truth. Could the malevolent curse and the 100-year sleep be more than just a legend? Is it possible that Sleeping Beauty's tale is based on real-life historical events? Join me on a captivating journey through the tangled thorns of myth and legend as we unravel the origins of this timeless tale. But brace yourself, for as we delve into the shadows of its creation, we may uncover a truth far darker and more chilling than you ever imagined. Welcome back, Darklings. Before we delve into the history behind the tale, let's first examine the most widely recognized rendition of the story. There are many different versions of Sleeping Beauty, and the earliest renditions are far from child-friendly. However, the story most familiar to us today closely resembles the one published by the Brothers Grimm in their 1812 collection, Children's and Household Tales. Long ago, a king and queen yearned for a child. Yet, despite their fervent wishes, their hearts remained heavy with longing. One day, as the queen bathed in her tub, a frog emerged from the water and told her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled, and before a year passes you will bring a daughter into the world." True to the frog's promise, the queen soon gave birth to a daughter so breathtakingly beautiful that the king's heart swelled with immeasurable joy. In his elation, he decreed a grand feast to celebrate the birth of his precious child. Invitations were sent far and wide, not only to family and friends, but also to the 13 wise women of the kingdom. However, with only 12 golden plates available for the feast, one wise woman was left uninvited. The feast was a spectacle of splendor, and as it drew to a close, the wise women stepped forward to present their magical gifts to the newborn princess. The first gave her virtue, the second beauty, the third wealth, and so on, bestowing upon her every blessing one could imagine. Just as the 11th wise woman finished her blessing, the air in the hall grew tense. The 13th wise woman stormed in, her face twisted with anger for being excluded. Without greeting anyone, she proclaimed in a voice that echoed through the hall, "In the princess's 15th year, she shall prick herself on a spindle and fall down dead." With that, she vanished, leaving a trail of fear and shock. Desperation filled the room until the 12th wise woman, who had yet to offer her gift, stepped forward. Though she couldn't undo the curse, she softened it, declaring, "The princess shall not die, but fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. Determined to protect his daughter, the king ordered all the spindles in the kingdom to be burned. As the years passed, the princess, named Briar Rose, blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Her well-behaved and friendly nature endeared her to everyone she met. People were captivated by her charm, and it seemed impossible not to fall in love with her. On her 15th birthday, while the king and queen were away, Briar Rose explored the castle alone. Her curiosity led her to an old forgotten tower with a narrow winding staircase. At the top, she found a small door with a rusty key. She turned the key, and the door creaked open to reveal an old woman spinning flax. "Good day, old woman," Briar Rose greeted her. "What are you doing?" "I am spinning," the old woman replied, nodding her head. "What is that thing that dances so merrily?" Briar Rose asked, reaching for the spindle. No sooner had she touched it than the curse took effect. She pricked her finger and collapsed onto a nearby bed, falling into a deep sleep. This enchantment spread throughout the castle. The newly returned king and queen, the servants, the animals, even the fire in the hearth and the leaves on the trees, all fell into a deep slumber. Over the years, a thick thorn hedge grew around the castle, shielding it from the outside world. The tale of the beautiful sleeping princess spread across the land. Many princes attempted to brave the thorns to reach her, yet none succeeded. The thorns ensnared them like merciless claws, claiming their lives in their dreadful grasp. A century later, a young prince arrived in the kingdom. He listened intently as an old man recounted the legend of the princess who had been asleep for 100 years. Undeterred by the grim tales of those who had perished before him, the prince boldly declared, "I am not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful Briar Rose." As he approached the thorn hedge, the 100 years came to an end. The thorns miraculously parted, transforming into large, beautiful flowers that allowed him to pass unharmed. He wandered through the silent castle, past the sleeping inhabitants, until he reached the tower and the small room where Briar Rose lay. She was so beautiful that he could not resist bending down to kiss her. As his lips touched hers, Briar Rose's eyes fluttered open. She awoke, smiling kindly at the prince. Hand in hand, they descended the tower, and as they did, the entire castle awoke. The king and queen, the servants, the animals, all shook off their long sleep. The castle bustled with life once more. To celebrate the prince's bravery and the awakening of Briar Rose, a magnificent wedding was held. The kingdom rejoiced, and the prince and little Briar Rose lived happily ever after. The Grimms originally compiled these tales to preserve German folklore, and while they were not initially intended specifically for children, they increasingly came to be viewed as such as their work spread throughout Europe. Consequently, the tales became more sanitized over time. In this version, I particularly liked the gruesome image of all the dead princes entangled in the thorn bush, highlighting the darker elements often found in the original folklore. The symbolism in this story has been interpreted to signify the maiden's transition into womanhood, where the final kiss serves as a metaphor for sexual awakening. The king's efforts to eradicate all the spindles to avert the curse can be seen as a father's attempt to delay his daughter growing up. Pricking her finger and drawing blood symbolizes the girl's first menstruation, while her prolonged sleep and awakening with the prince's arrival implies that women should wait for a worthy suitor. Themes of nature are prominent in many Brothers Grimm tales, often depicted as a powerful, sentient force that interacts with human destiny. This portrayal was controversial, suggesting nature had its own free will, challenging the established religious views of the time. In Sleeping Beauty, the thorns surrounding the castle act autonomously, opening and closing by themselves. This was softened in Victorian English translations, making it clear that the thorns did not act of their own accord. Sleeping Beauty has a rich, long lineage, with many storytellers crafting similar tales long before the Grimms. A notable precursor is the Italian tale Sun, Moon and Talia by Giambattista Basile, published in 1636, over 150 years before the Grimms. While the tale bears a recognisable resemblance to Sleeping Beauty, it features some rather disturbing differences. The story begins with a great lord who is blessed with the birth of a daughter named Talia. He summons the wise men of his land to predict her future, and they foresee that she will face great danger from a splinter of flax. To protect her, her father forbids any flax or similar material from entering his house. As Talia grows into a young and beautiful lady, she looks out of a window one day and sees an old woman spinning. Curious, Talia asks the woman to teach her. As she takes the distaff and spindle, a splinter of flax gets under her nail, and she immediately falls dead upon the ground. Grief-stricken, her father places her on a throne under a canopy of brocade. Unable to bear the sorrow, he abandons the house with Talia's body inside and tries to forget his misfortune. After some time, a king goes hunting nearby and discovers the abandoned house when one of his falcons flies through a window. Exploring the house, he finds Talia, who he initially believes is asleep. He tries futilely to wake her, but her beauty stirs his desires. He carries her to a bed and gathers the first fruits of love. Leaving her on the bed, he returns to his own kingdom and, preoccupied with his duties, forgets about the incident. 9 months later, Talia gives birth to twins, a boy and a girl, who are attended by fairies, who place the infants at their mother's breasts. One day, one of the babies sucks on Talia's finger, dislodging the splinter of flax, and she awakens. Though initially bewildered by the children, Talia soon loves and cares for them deeply. The king eventually remembers Talia and goes back to her. Overjoyed to find her awake with their children, who are named Sun and Moon, they spend a few happy days together before he departs for his kingdom, promising to return soon. Back at his palace, the king cannot stop thinking about Talia, Sun and Moon. His wife grows suspicious when he utters their names in his sleep. She summons the king's secretary, threatening him with death unless he reveals the truth, and terrified, he confesses everything. Consumed with jealousy, the queen sends the secretary to Talia, asking for the children in the king's name. Talia, overjoyed, complies. The queen then orders her cook to kill the children and prepare them as a meal for the king. When the king arrives, the queen eagerly has the meal served. As the king eats with delight, praising the food's delicious taste, the queen repeatedly taunts him, saying, "Eat, eat, for you are eating your own." Not satisfied with this evil deed, the queen orders the secretary to bring Talia. Confronting her, the queen hurls insults, accusing Talia of stealing her husband. Talia tries to explain that she was in a death sleep and had no part in the king's actions, but the queen refuses to listen. She orders a large fire to be lit in the courtyard and commands that Talia be thrown into it. Talia, kneeling, begs to be allowed to undress first. The queen agrees, wanting to take Talia's clothes, which are embroidered with gold and pearls. With each item Talia removes, she lets out a loud scream. As she is about to remove her last garment, the king suddenly appears and demands to know what is happening. The queen laughs and gleefully informs him that he has eaten his own children. The king, enraged, orders the queen to be thrown into the fire she prepared for Talia. He then commands the execution of the secretary and the cook. However, the cook quickly reveals that he has not in fact killed the children, but has hidden them in his own cottage and prepared lambs for the king instead. The cook's wife brings sun and moon before the king, who is overjoyed. The king rewards the cook by making him a chamberlain, marries Talia, and they live a long and happy life with their children. The story concludes with the moral: those whom fortune favours find good luck, even in their sleep. Sun, Moon and Talia is a tale rich with themes of sexual awakening and the consequences of jealousy and betrayal. Its intended audience was the upper-class adults of the 17th century, who would have found its complex and sometimes horrific elements engaging and thought-provoking. For contemporary readers, the tale harbours many disturbing elements: the non-consensual intercourse, the threat to Talia's life, the queen's cannibalistic revenge plot, and the fact that Talia is not in an enchanted sleep, but is actually described as dead. This story mirrors a broader cultural fascination with death, decay, and the supernatural, which were frequently explored in art and literature at the time. But there may also be a real-life inspiration behind the tale. The body of Catherine of Valois was subject to one of the strangest afterlives of any royal, presenting a striking parallel to the tale. When Catherine of Valois, wife of England's King Henry V, passed away in 1437, she was laid to rest with a dignified funeral, where a painted wooden effigy adorned in lavish fabrics was used. This effigy, which was carried during her funeral procession, is still preserved and on display at Westminster Abbey. Designed to resemble the deceased as closely as possible, the effigy originally had a wig made of human hair. During the reign of her grandson Henry VII, renovations at Westminster Abbey led to the accidental disturbance of Catherine's tomb in the early 1500s. Her coffin was damaged, revealing the upper half of her miraculously well-preserved corpse, described by some accounts as appearing merely asleep. Initially set aside with plans for reburial after the construction, word spread about the body of the beautiful queen, who was only 35 years old when she died. Soon, Catherine's remains became a macabre curiosity and tourist attraction. The diarist Samuel Pepys famously visited the deceased queen on his birthday and wrote, "On Shrove Tuesday 1669, I to the abbey went, and by favour did see the body of Queen Catherine of Valois, and had the upper part of the body in my hands, and I did kiss her mouth, reflecting upon it I did kiss a queen." Kissing Catherine's corpse became a peculiar tradition for visitors. This fascination can be partly attributed to the romanticised depiction of her in Shakespeare's 1599 play, Henry V. In the play, King Henry praises Catherine's beauty with the famous line, "You have witchcraft in your lips." This portrayal likely inspired people to believe in the magical or enchanting power of her kiss, even in death. With little supervision over her remains, the mistreatment unfortunately continued and escalated over the years. In 1786, it was recorded that young schoolboys had amused themselves by prodding, poking and tearing at the corpse. By the late 18th century, a visitor described the body he saw as a shapeless mass of whitish colour. Finally, in 1878, Catherine's remains were reinterred in a proper tomb within Westminster Abbey. However, by this time several portions of her body were found to be missing. The entire front portion of her skull, most of her vertebrae, all but one of her ribs and two of her right arm bones. And despite an exhaustive search, not a single one of her teeth could be found. It appears these body parts had been taken as souvenirs by tourists over the years. But interestingly, her legs that had remained wrapped in cerecloth were still remarkably well preserved. Reports describe the skin as smooth and supple. It's possible that the story of Catherine's remains, on display for almost 350 years, contributed to the legend of Sleeping Beauty. However, the historical display of dead women's bodies extends beyond Queen Catherine. During the medieval period, particularly in Catholic Europe, numerous examples exist of women whose bodies, exhumed sometimes years after death, remained untouched by decay. This phenomenon, known as incorruptibility, was seen by the Catholic Church as a sign of divine favour, indicating a life of holiness and purity. Incorrupt bodies were often displayed in churches for public veneration, drawing pilgrims seeking to witness this divine sign. One notable example is St. Catherine of Bologna, whose incorrupt body was discovered emitting a sweet smell weeks after her death in 1463, leading to her canonization. She was placed on a throne within the Church of the Corpus Domini in Bologna, Italy, and has been there ever since. Despite undergoing natural mummification over the years, her preservation remains remarkable, given the age of her remains. Women's incorrupt bodies were particularly seen as miraculous due to broader medical, religious, and cultural beliefs about women during the medieval era. Medieval medicine, based on the balance of the four humours, held that women's bodies were more susceptible to corruption due to an excess of phlegm and blood, making them more prone to diseases and conditions. Hysteria, for example, was a common diagnosis for women and is actually derived from the Greek word for uterus, hystera. These medical beliefs, coupled with societal views on sexuality and morality, portrayed women as needing control to prevent moral and physical corruption. Christian doctrine often cited Eve's temptation in the Garden of Eden as evidence of women's inherent susceptibility to sin. The tale of Sleeping Beauty reflects these themes, with the preservation of her beauty amidst apparent death symbolizing incorruptibility. This imagery aligns with the medieval ideal of the perfect woman, beautiful, spiritually pure, and morally incorrupt. Catholic teaching links incorruptibility to Christ's resurrection, emphasizing that the faithful's resurrection will mirror his. Thus, Sleeping Beauty's death, or death-like sleep, followed by resurrection, symbolizes purity and divine favor. Additionally, the dead maiden who does not decay and gives birth introduces a theme of immaculate conception, reflecting ancient tales of women chosen by gods to bear their children, underscoring their virtue and purity. The Christian counterpart is the Virgin Mary, whose purity led to the divine birth of Jesus. Interestingly, a medieval version of the Sleeping Beauty story mirrors this idea. Perceforest is an anonymous work of prose written in French around 1340. It describes a fictional history of Great Britain and its connections to the world of King Arthur. Among its tales, it includes what is considered the earliest surviving Sleeping Beauty story. At Princess Zelandine's birth, three goddesses, Lucina, Themis, and Venus, were invited. Themis, upset by being given an inferior knife at the meal, cursed the child so that the first time she touched flax, it would stab her finger, putting her into an eternal sleep that she would never awake from. Venus, however, vowed to save Zelandine. As she grew into a beautiful woman, Zelandine fell in love with a Scottish knight named Troilus. One day, Troilus learned that Zelandine had fallen to sleep while spinning and had not awakened. Seeking guidance, he visited the Temple of Venus and received a cryptic message. When you pluck from the slit the fruit that holds the cure, the girl will be healed. Confused, Troilus journeyed to the tower where Zelandine slept. The west wind, in the form of a bird, transported him through the high window to her chamber. Despite his hesitation, Troilus entered and found Zelandine lying naked on a richly adorned bed. He tried to awaken her with a kiss, but she did not stir. Frustrated, he chastised Venus, who scolded him for not understanding her hints. Finally, overcome by her beauty, Troilus begged forgiveness and made love to Zellandine. Before leaving, he placed his ring on her finger. 9 months later, Zellandine, still asleep, gave birth to a son. The child, seeking to nurse, sucked the flax from her finger, and Zellandine awoke. Initially distressed by her lost virginity, she consoled herself upon discovering Troilus's ring, realizing it was he whom she loved. Soon after Zellandine awakens, her baby is stolen by a half-bird, half-woman creature through the tower's window. Despite this, their son grows up to become a great knight who performs many heroic deeds and is recognized as an ancestor of Sir Lancelot. His heroic stature reflects themes from ancient mythology, where offspring of divine or extraordinary unions often rise to greatness. In all versions of the Sleeping Beauty story, wise figures foretell the girl's destiny at birth. Many ancient cultures, including Greek, Roman, Slavic, and Norse, feature fates, supernatural beings who spin the threads of mortals' lives. The enchanted sleep is caused by spinning or a spindle, which are associated with the fates, who literally spin destinies. This motif reflects the belief that one's fate is predetermined and unchangeable, woven into the fabric of existence from birth. Both these themes feature in an ancient Greek myth that might have influenced the story of Sleeping Beauty. Danae, daughter of King Acrisius of Argos, was prophesied to bear a son who would kill her father. To prevent this, her father imprisoned Danae in a bronze tomb beneath his castle. However, Zeus visited her as a shower of golden rain, resulting in the birth of a son, Perseus. Upon discovering Perseus, Acrisius cast them into the sea in a chest, but they survived and were rescued by a fisherman. Perseus grew up to become a legendary hero, slaying Medusa and saving Andromeda. Eventually, the prophecy comes true when Perseus accidentally kills Acrisius with a discus, thus fulfilling the will of the fates. But there are numerous other stories from various times and cultures that share similarities with Sleeping Beauty. For example, the story of Brynhild in Norse mythology. Brynhild, a Valkyrie, is punished by Odin for her defiance and cursed to live as a mortal woman. Fearing marriage to a coward, Odin pricks her with the thorn of sleep and places her on a mountaintop encircled by fire. She can only be awakened by a man brave enough to pass through the flames. Sigurd accomplishes this, awakening her by removing her armor, and they fall in love. Stories are mirrors to the societies that create them, and Sleeping Beauty is no exception. Many ancient cultures believed in a predetermined destiny controlled by divine forces. In medieval Europe, Christian doctrine emphasized that life's events were part of a divine plan, teaching moral lessons about humility and obedience. Sleeping Beauty highlights these beliefs. The heroine is passive, sleeping, yet that is the whole point of the story. She does nothing, but her destiny still unfolds as foretold, illustrating the concept of inescapable fate. Moreover, the tale offers insights into historical attitudes towards women's roles and bodies, highlighting ideals of moral goodness and obedience, lack of agency, and the emphasis on physical appearance and male validation. While these perspectives are problematic by today's standards, they provide valuable glimpses into the societal expectations and challenges faced by women in those eras. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Sleeping Beauty is its enduring nature. Despite its ancient origins, the story continues to evolve and be retold, captivating new audiences to this day. But what surprised you the most about Sleeping Beauty's origins? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if your hunger for the origins of fairy tales still persists, be sure to subscribe and explore the rest of my channel. See you in a future video.